So have you, I know that, I think that Sarah has already talked about probes with the group, right? So the gene probe for the residents, and Maria in the room, although you probably do know about it, the company GenPro came out with 4 probes a number of years ago before we even knew about pyrosequencing. And they were probes that could specifically identify through a probe rather than PCR, Mycobacterium tuberculosis complex, Mycobacterium avium complex, Mycobacterium kansasi, and Mycobacterium gordoni. It's a 2.5 hour or thereabouts procedure, and it is not PCR, so it's not sensitive like PCR, but it allows you to see hybridization of one of those organisms if that's the one that it is. So we, after we do pyrosequencing on Thursday, if something doesn't work on Thursday and we think it might be one of those organisms, we probe it on Friday. It sounds backwards. It sounds like you want to do the probe first and then the pyro. But we get more answers with pyro, so we decided to go in that direction. So we use probe as kind of our confirmation, or the test that we use for those that don't work on the pyrosequencing. We also use probes on Friday. If like something like this where we get no hits and we don't have any other history on this patient, we would go do a probe on Friday to rule out TB, so that we can at least report out on Friday, this is not TB. The goal of the Mycobacterium lab, in my opinion, is to tell the doc as quick as possible it's not TB or it is TB. So we always try to make sure we can do that. And if we can't do it on Thursday because the pyro doesn't work, then we do it on Friday. But Mary will tell you right now, when she looks at those patterns, she knows exactly when it's going to be TB or not. And almost never is it TB when it doesn't work on the pyrosequencing. This is designated to pick up TB. It loves TB, so it does a very good job. So you really don't have to worry about it. But if we get no hits and it means we don't know what went on, then we'll probe it on Friday to make sure that we can rule it out.
And it's already in there
As
preliminary,
as
not TB.
Not TB, so that's good, and the doc already knows that already. And now with that MAI, low positive on the probe, that probably is what it is, but we do know that we have some issues with MAI in the probe sometimes.
Well, if I look at this, one of the things, usually 18, 19, and 20 in the 30 base pairs spell out cat in most of your AFBs.
Oh my Lord.
And
I just learned that today
28,
after 7 years
29,
of
and
listening
30
to
are
this.
GGT. And neither
there.
one of those are there.
Oh, wow.
So I don't quite know
Maybe
what.
it's not a mycobacteria, huh?
Oh, please.
Ah.
I hope not.
No, I'm
But
kidding, I'm kidding.
we'll check. And
Yeah.
maybe there's something in there, because there's a lot of little
Yeah, little
peaks.
lines on there, yeah, little peaks.
So there may be some
You
contamination.
can see most
in
of
it.
these are pretty clean, but yeah, let me see
Yeah, that
those.
one you got a lot.
So the next one, I'm just laughing, sorry, you'll know why in a minute. It's sputum. It's one of our own patients, so it's not Akron General. And interestingly enough, in 1 week, we have the same organism. It's amazing. So it's Kansasi scrofulaceum, right?
Yeah.
And you have to separate it out next week.
Well,
Or do
I'm
the probe
gonna
tomorrow.
do the probe tomorrow. If it's
This is emphysema, abnormal lung findings, if you will, and it's a Dr. Culver patient. So maybe it's Kansasi. This one could be a Kansasi, yeah, if you will. 60-year-old female. Oh, interesting. So the other one turned out to be a scrofulaceum when we did the second set of primers, negative on the probe. But we have a Mycobacterium kansasi probe. Mary will do that tomorrow, and we'll know tomorrow whether this is Kansasi. Oh.
these were all from solid media. We are now getting the liquid media,
Okay.
and they failed.
So this is Dr. Asada's patient, and it is a sputum, and he has the diagnosis on it already. We never need to do anything for Carlos. Pulmonary mycobacterium he has as the diagnosis. So there we go, because it's previous Mycobacterium abscessus.
But I guess it was 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So this one's again an abscessus?
No, it failed.
It failed. It said it was close to MAI, but it was only 87%, so.
So tomorrow
We'll
you'll
be
do
doing
the
the probes tomorrow.
TB and
I looked because it came in, did it come in yesterday?
7/16 is when the specimen came in, and it was positive on 7/25
I looked at the plates. Now granted, it's only a day. But they weren't growing yet.
Okay,
So
okay,
I'll look at them again tomorrow. We definitely have more.
interesting.
But I'll do the probes.
Okay. And then Hauser, this patient is a BAL from an outside lab, no other information. It's from Summa Health, and it came out to be abscessus Shaloni.
Yeah, and this one came on an LJ slant, and I looked at the transfer plates, and actually they are growing.
Okay, good.
So
Great.
that's
So we
good.
have an abscessus Shaloni from a BAL. And then a sputum, a Tomford patient.
Failed.
Oh, 59-year-old male. and we probably don't know anything else about this patient. It came in on the 12th of July. It was positive on the 25th, 13 days, which is really, really good for TB. TB usually takes about, 10 to 14 days, but it failed.
I'll do the probes on it tomorrow.
Okay, and the probes will be done tomorrow. Okay, cool.
So it looks like the reason why it fails, it shows, Mary, and I think you've taught me this before, that if it's from liquid media, it would be a faster growth, but the amount would be not as much as if you have it growing on solid media.
Right, and the digestion process, a lot of these are like respiratory specimens, and for the midget tubes, we go down in the bottom and suck up, because that's where the organism, we suck up what that is, and we put that in the uterus. Well, yeah, they could be dead, but you could be sucking up little bits of like respiratory flora, like Rothia and stuff like that, and that is so closely related to TB that it can interfere and give us, like this one, with just a series of peaks. So.
And like if it's on solid LJ slant, it's going to be most likely a pure culture,
yeah.
and you can have enough inoculum for your pyrosequencing or for your probe.
Yeah.
So we have something going in a broth, especially these midget tubes, which you don't really see a lot of turbidity in them necessarily, if you will. You're kind of living in this world of not exactly seeing the organism you're putting in your pyrosequencing, and there are some difficulties with the sensitivity of that because of that, 'cause you never know how much bug you have there. When you see the colony on the plate, you pick a little bit of it, you probably have enough bug. So there is a difference in the performance of all of these sequencing methods if they're coming out of broth versus coming out of a solid media. And Marion, who's the expert on all of this, in addition to Mary, would say, wow, if it's coming out of that broth, you just don't know if you're really going to get good results. But why do we do broth? We do broth because cultures grow out faster in broth than they grow out in solid medium. And with mycobacteria, that could be the difference between a week or two. So instead of sitting around and not knowing what it is, you want to work from the broth as quickly as you can, but sometimes it is an issue. So.
And then if I could interrupt you, Dr.
Please
Paul.
do.
One other maybe key important feature about pyrosequencing that I wanted to stress, especially for the clinical point of view, is that the pyrosequencing really allows the lab to help us so much because you have rapid identification that as soon as you have growth from the midget or from maybe the solid media, you can get us that identification even within the same day, as long as it's the Thursday run.
Exactly.
So if we have the growth maybe on Wednesday, you can give us potentially the answer for if it's non-TB or what the species is of that mycobacteria on the next day. Whereas if we use biochemical or phenotypic identification, it could, how many weeks, Mary, potentially for
if you do the growth
speciation?
studies and everything else, to this day, if we have to speciate tuberculosis from bovis, it's three to 4 weeks.
Minimal.
Minimal.
Yeah.
So,
So 1 day versus 3
Yeah,
to 4
4
weeks,
weeks, yeah.
if you have enough inoculum and enough bug from your culture media.
I give a workshop, you don't need to annotate, but I give a workshop at ASM, and we've been doing it for 6 or 7 years now with a couple of other experts in mycobacterium other than me. And indeed, we virtually have said to the audience of the groups that come in, and they're technologists and laboratories for the most part, if you're not doing some form of sequencing, direct amplification, midget tubes, you shouldn't be running your mycobacterial lab. Phenotypic biochemicals are out, except in rare cases where sometimes you still have to go to there to identify some organisms like Mycobacterium bovis right now and a few others. But you can't use phenotype and biochemicals to identify these organisms any longer. It just takes too long. The other tools are there, they're available. And in addition, pyrosequencing gives you all those names. If we were doing phenotypes, we would get half of that list we wouldn't be able to identify because there are no biochemical studies that show what these organisms should do. And as Mary started out in the beginning, the newest textbook that we deal with now doesn't even have biochemicals listed. So they're totally removed from the American Society for Microbiology manual because they just feel strongly everyone should be using some sort of molecular or mass spec method for identification of these. So it's really something in my, I've been in this business for 35 years, and Mary's been there less than that. But it's a huge changeover from what we used to do. It's just a massive changeover.
I have a question
Yes.
about the pyrosequencing.
Yes.
So if, for example, you mentioned that Dr. Prokop and somebody else had developed
Marian.
this new set of primers to identify one of the species. And so whenever you do that, your results, what do you compare them to? Because they should be incorporated, that set of primers is gonna give you a certain sequence that should be in your database so it can be compared to. Is that included in the instrument or the software or the central database that the company provides, or do you have to go and compare those results to a national database?
So we developed our own database to start out working with this, and it was a brand new company that came to us and talked about development of the database. So here's how the first starting by Dr. Prokop and Marian were to line up all of the different sequencing patterns of the organisms we were looking for, to find that hypervariable region in the middle, and to work with that to develop the primers that you can then use for this pyrosequencing. So we developed a database, we get all the organisms in a computerized database so that we can get the computer to look at it, etc. And now when we get new organisms, in order to add them onto there, we do have some steps that we have to go through to get it in there because we want to make sure. When we originally did our database creation, we made sure the organisms that were in there were very well characterized. A lot of them phenotypically, I will absolutely agree with you that, but many of them were sequenced as well, not by us, by someone outside of here, in order to make sure whatever we put in there was really truly the organism we're talking about.
So therefore, whenever you develop a new set of primers, it means that also you put in your database, add that expected sequence to your database.
So the
you can
primer
match it.
pairs that are used are always the same on this. So it's not a different set of primers, it's always the same. The only difference is the Nocardia one that was developed afterwards. And then now we're working on, but by a different method, not pyrosequencing, separating out that Chelonia abscessus. It'll be a different method totally that's being used, it won't be pyrosequencing. So it really is the same set of primers all the time.
I know for
in
all
all
of
of
these,
those,
that's
yeah.
why
Right.
we have the same,
Right.
just variations of the same sequence.
You got it.
But in those, in the case that you were mentioning, where in order to separate, I think was it abscesses, they had
It's a
developed
different method. It's a whole total different sequencing method.
it's
So-
not pyrosequencing.
No, we're using
Oh, okay.
HSP,
Okay.
or we're using, Marion's got another.
For Chelonia abscessus,
Yeah.
I think it's a higher solution melt.
Higher resolution.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
a totally
Oh, it
different
wasn't
method, not
pyrosequencing. Okay.
pyrosequencing. But
Okay.
sorry, I didn't understand your question. Yeah, absolutely. A whole different method is being used other than pyrosequencing.
Oh, I thought it was in the pyrosequencing, you just had looked at a different area.
Well, that was,
For the,
This is-
for
that
the
was also
Kansas
methylated.
Scrofulation, she did.
This is where they
So for that, you're right.
Moved
That is a
to-
different primer set.
that is a different primer.
Uh-huh.
I have to ask for that one.
Oh, okay.
That is
to order it
different.
up.
That one is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the one that I
But,
was
yeah,
talking
you
about.
only
It
use-
also has highly methylated area, whatever
Right,
you use.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, absolutely. You said something and it made me, I should have said it right then there because my mind just goes. I thought of something else to say when you were commenting on that one. Oh, I know. Sorry, it wasn't about that. So the company then, after Dr. Prokop, Mary, and everybody worked on this, they now sell a product called PyroMark, which is as a lab, not ours, because since we developed this, we buy our primers and pros from other places and it was too expensive from them. But at any rate, they then developed a kit which they could sell to a lab that's doing mycobacterial workup, and then you too could do pyrosequencing in your lab. And that was rolling along for a while, but it was never FDA cleared. So then the FDA put the kibosh on that and said, the company Pyrosequencing, now called Kyogen, you can't do that anymore. You can only sell the pieces parts, and the lab would have to put the kit together in their own lab.